together, still we do it right together. Can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must do his bit.
Welcome to another edition of The Public Interest. My name is David Granger, and on this series of programs, we examine issues which are of interest to all Guyanese, born or not yet born, and at home and in the diaspora. At present, one of the most important issues is the relationship with Venezuela. In fact, it's been one of the most important issues for the last 6 decades or more. And in the wake of the encounter at Argyle airport on the 14th of December 2023, several issues need to be examined and re-examined to determine whether Guyana's interests, Guyana's national interests, have been severely damaged by what took place then. Now, we all know that in 1962, about 68 years ago, Venezuela invented a spurious claim to Guyana's territory. And it took this matter to the United Nations in 1962, long before it became independent. The PPP was in office at the time. And it brought this matter before the United Nations. Many people didn't suspect that it would be taken very seriously. But Venezuela used that spurious invention to intimidate the United Kingdom into engaging in what came to be called the Geneva Agreement in February 1966, even before Guyana became independent. Although Guyana was a party to that agreement, it was really an agreement between the United Kingdom, which still had responsibility for external relations to some extent, and Venezuela. And that agreement has been used by Venezuela, although the wording is very clear. It's quite neutral. It has been used by Venezuela ever since to justify its own approach to the territorial question. The very year of independence, 1966, Venezuela invaded Guyana's part of the island of Ancoko in October 1966. Venezuela waited until all the British troops departed after independence, flag raising and all that. The British Army was withdrawn, and the young Guyana Defense Force had to take over responsibilities for the territory. Venezuela pounced in the island of Ancoko and it never gave it back. So it is still, a very serious issue that despite Guyana's claims of violation, Venezuela has just never given back that territory to us. Yet, Venezuela insists on claiming Guyana's 5 hinterland regions, regions 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. That is, it used to be called the Zona en Reclamación, but now, as we discover, particularly emboldened by a spurious referendum in 2023, in December 2023, Venezuela now claims it has a mandate from the people to call that territory that it claims Guayana Essequibo. So they don't report it as a Zona en Reclamación. They've already apparently effected the reclamation, so they've now made it into a state. My friends, this is serious. This is serious. And going to Argyle to discuss this matter means that people must be well prepared for Venezuelan perfidy and diplomacy. Venezuela consistently and continuously impaired Guyana's territorial integrity and economic development. From 1968, 66 years ago, July 1960, Venezuela issued decree number 1552. This is under President Raul Leone in 1787. This decree number 1787. The very Independence Day, May 26, 2015, when I was sworn in as president, or soon after I was sworn in as president, Venezuela issued this decree, 1787. And up to 2021, under the present PPP administration, Venezuela has issued another decree, 4415, claiming part of Guyana's territory, especially the sea space, and empowering its armed forces to enforce Venezuelan jurisdiction over that territory that it claims. Venezuela has never removed these decrees, and these are three of the most injurious decrees. There are other smaller decrees which have been passed from time to time, purporting to annex Guyana's sea space as part of Venezuelan territory. In 1969, I can tell you this because I was there, Venezuela supported the rebellion in Rupununi, the largest region of Guyana. And Venezuela supplied weapons and training to the rebels. The rebels were not Amerindian people. The rebels were other people who owned huge haciendas in Rupununi, but it had Venezuelan backing. All the aircraft flight routes took them between Rupununi and eastern Venezuela. Venezuela issued a decree prohibiting the establishment of a satellite station in the Burima-Waini region under Hugo Chavez. Venezuela opposed the issuance of petroleum licenses off the Essequibo coast. Venezuela seized the Technic Perdana in October 2013, less than 8 weeks after Venezuelan President Maduro visited Georgetown. Laughing and shaking hands, they seized the Technic Perdana. And Venezuela also intercepted the ExxonMobil research vessel, Ramform Thetis, in December 2018. So Venezuela has always been hostile to Guyana. And we have to look at this mindset, which has guided that hostility over a period of decades. It is not a flash in the pan. It is not something that comes and goes. It has been consistent, and it has been driven by the sole purpose of claiming that territory, particularly the maritime zone for Venezuela. It's not only driven by oil, because even before oil was an issue, they were claiming the Salida al Atlántico. They wanted a part of the Atlantic facade so that they could have the right and authority and power to be a world-class maritime state. Venezuela has continued to violate Guyana's land, air, and sea space. It has deployed troops and anti-aircraft missiles on the borders. There are photographs of that deployment. When Mr. Mark Phillips was the chief of staff in 2015, you remember that. Venezuela launched armed gunboats in the Cuyuni River, again in 2015 under Mark Phillips when he's chief of staff. Venezuela landed military helicopters at Caican. Venezuela shot at vessels carrying unarmed civilians, geology and mines commission officials in the Cuyuni River. And Venezuela repeatedly has seized and intercepted fishing vessels. Venezuela frequently has overflown Guyana's airspace, at least up to March 2021. So this is not an angelic neighbor. This is an aggressive neighbor. And if we're going to go to Argyle Airport to discuss peace, it means that there must be the imposition of some restraint on the Venezuelan government, Mayor Flores and the Venezuelan armed forces. They are the ones who are breaching the peace. Guyana doesn't have the power to confront the Venezuelan armed forces. Every Venezuelan president has been faithful to that policy, the policy of aggression against Guyana. From the time of Raul Leone in 1968 with that obnoxious decree claiming the waters off the coast of what is now the Pomeroon-Superdam region and the Burima-Waini region. We remember that Carlos Andres Perez visited Georgetown in 1978. And he thought he was the cleverest man in the Western Hemisphere. He promised the then president, head of state, head of government, to finance the Upper Mazuni hydropower scheme if Guyana would give them the Salida al Atlántico, the access to the Atlantic. That is a piece of the Essequibo coast, so that they could become an Atlantic naval power. He was bold, he was bold-faced, and our government was able to resist those blandishments and those promises, and it never occurred to the government of the day to take this request, this offer to finance the Upper Mazruni hydropower project seriously. And they promised to reduce the territorial claim from 160,000 square kilometers to 31,000 square kilometers. Very tempting. But our government then did not take the bait. Later on, Hugo Chavez Frias came along, and he came with a bag full of gifts. He signed a lot of agreements to cooperate in agriculture, in energy, in chemicals, when he came here in July. He proposed a gas pipeline to bring gas into Guyana to relieve its electric supply problems. So you can see, from the time of Raul Leone, from the time of Carlos Andres Perez, from the time of Hugo Chavez, they have always been prepared to use the carrot and the stick, sometimes more stick than carrot. But Miraflores, the Venezuelan palace, the presidential office, has concocted this theory of globality. They seem to feel that by treating the territorial controversy as part of a relationship in which Guyana would give up something and Venezuela would give up something. So one of the tricks that Venezuela proposed is to have joint development of those 5 regions, a shared development in which Venezuela would decide how development would take place. And of course, Venezuela would own its investments. So that is one area of globality. Don't let us talk about the border alone. Let us talk about the development of the 5 regions. It's very tempting, of course, to the gullible. And of course, it never worked, because Venezuela is not interested in developing. Venezuela's got problems with its own. Venezuela is not interested in developing 5 of Guyanese regions, perhaps the 5 poorest regions, at the expense of its own development. And as you know, right now, Guyana is host to over 30,000 Venezuelan migrants. So let them look after their own problems and stop paying attention to Guyana's internal problems. So Venezuela bring gifts. And some gullible people are always taken in by the gifts. Debt relief, Petrocaribe, rice sales, construction of a gymnasium, construction of a rehabilitation center in Region 5, concessionary petroleum sales. These are all inducements. These are the carrots. And in return, Venezuela wants something, which is the maritime zone that Guyana owns. So it's a question of threats, which are the sticks, and carrots, which are the gifts. In the meantime, Venezuela continues to harass Guyana, vessels at sea, our soldiers on land, and our villages on the border, on the western border, by hostile incursions. The question of the Geneva Agreement keeps coming up. Many Guyanese don't understand what the Geneva Agreement is all about. The matter is that the border, the territory was settled since 1899, 125 years ago. The Geneva Agreement simply creates a platform for dialogue, not not about changing the border, about ensuring that there are no hostile actions by Venezuela against Guyana. But Venezuela has interpreted the Geneva Agreement as a, a law, an instruction, an injunction, a measure under which the whole border question should be revised, which is quite preposterous. So you find the Venezuelan Minister of Defense reaffirming the commitment of the Venezuelan armed forces to fulfill the requirements of the so-called, in their definition, of the Geneva Agreement to resettle the territorial question, and promising that we will not stop being present at the Atlantic facade until this territorial controversy over the Essequibo ends in a practical and satisfactory solution. Well, it ended in a practical and satisfactory solution since 1899. But the Venezuelan Minister of Defense is not satisfied with that. Then even the Venezuelan Vice President recalls that this agreement, the Geneva Agreement, is the only valid legal instrument to achieve a practical and mutually satisfactory solution to the controversy. That is the mindset which is preventing a solution to the controversy. When at the level of the Minister of Defense and the level of the Vice President, they don't understand that the matter has been settled and that the United Nations Secretary General, under the very agreement that they're quoting, the Geneva Agreement, has the authority to determine how the matter would be settled. The matter is not going to be settled at Argyle Airport. The matter is not going to be settled in Brasilia. The matter is not going to be settled in Caracas or Georgetown. The matter will be settled where the United Nations Secretary General decided to be settled. That is in The Hague, in the Netherlands. So by claiming that the Geneva Agreement is the only valid legal instrument, she's hopelessly wrong, because the Geneva Agreement actually empowers the United Nations Secretary General to determine how the matter is to be settled. So we have a major disjunction, discontinuity here in approaching the so-called Geneva Agreement, which only tries to create a path, tries to create a route for not the settlement of the disorder, but for the resolution of controversy surrounding the territorial question. So unless there's this understanding, there's no point going to Argyle, because this matter has been trashed out for over 6 decades. Argyle cannot undo what the Geneva Agreement has agreed to, or what the United Nations Secretary General has agreed to, or what the ICJ has determined will happen. Argyle is a waste of time. It is worse than a waste of time. It is damaging to Guyana's diplomacy. And we must understand that. There's no place for Argyle in this controversy. It is worse than a sideshow. And it has created a lot of confusion, because it has now created a new platform for discussion, in which Venezuela thinks that they have now established a forum for face-to-face discussions. And this is what is responsible for the president of Venezuela boasting that we've done it. And the vice president boasting that we forced Guyana to the bargaining table. And the Minister of Defense boasting that the Venezuelan armed forces are now empowered to enforce the law, what they call the law. So the Argyle process has damaged the existing process on the United Nations, because Miraflores, the Venezuelan palace of the presidential palace, creates an illusion that this matter can be settled by bilateral dialogue. And this dialogue is enforced by the Venezuelan notion of globality, that they have a right to determine how those 5 regions 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, and 9 of Guyana would be developed, and they must be part of it. This is what they've called the Guyana Essequiba, and made a state and appointed an administrator for that state. So they feel that by pushing the Chavez Rehabilitation Center in Region 5, or pushing a gymnasium, pushing Petrocarnival, well, Guyana will eventually cave in and give in to Venezuelan territorial demands. Wrong. Venezuela has reinforced this dialogue by accusing Guyana of having 14 secret bases established by United Nations Southern Command. You know, it is preposterous that the United Nations Southern Command, Southcom as it's called, actually has 14 secret bases in the territory that Venezuela claimed, Guyana Essequiba. It claims that Guyana is responding to the interests of the United States Southern Command and the CIA by granting concessions to companies such as ExxonMobil to operate in the maritime territory it claims. This is what is being fed to the Venezuelan public. It says that Miraflores says that the government of Guyana is a government that is subject to the economic and corrupt practices of ExxonMobil. What we see, therefore, my friends, is that Miraflores has rekindled the controversy. And December 2023 is an important month in the evolution of this controversy. Unfortunately, it was the timing of the arrival of a British warship, the HMS Trent. I mean, the Trent is really a little vessel that is used to pursue drug traffickers. It's not a warship at all. It's an offshore patrol vessel. It's meant to catch people who are poaching or smuggling drugs. It's got a little pop gun. But Venezuela treated this as a serious military threat. And they ordered an exercise called Exercise Domingo Antonio Cifuentes 2023. Venezuela deployed 5,682 officers of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, that is called. That's what the army is called, the Bolivarian National Armed Forces. 3 ocean patrol vessels, 2 logistical transports, 3 multipurpose vessels, 3 Coast Guard vessels, 8 infantry amphibious vehicles of the Bolivarian Navy, 7 missile boats, 5 helicopters, 6 fighter planes, 5 F-16 fighter planes, 12 Sukhoi fighter planes, rapid reaction units of the special forces, paratroopers and the Bolivarian militia. All this Venezuela triggered in December 2023. And they said it was a response to the threat of the United States Southern Command and the visit of the United Kingdom vessel HMS Trent. So with this in mind, Venezuela went to Argyle on the 14th of December. And you need to understand, my friends, the nature of this conspiracy. It was not an accident that they chose St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Before Venezuela went, it promulgated an organic order declaring the Essequibo to be a constituent part of Venezuela. And it continued to disrespect the provisional measures ordered by the ICJ. So we were walking into a trap by not asking Venezuela to remove these impediments. We cannot discuss peace in the hemisphere if the very measures that you've implemented in the month of December 2023 are offensive and are hostile and aggressive. The Venezuelan Strategic Operation Commander announced the plan to link Venezuela infrastructure projects to the mainland. And you can see pictures and videos of the construction which is taking place. Venezuelan troops are not cleaning up the streets of Caracas. They are constructing military emplacements on Ancoco and in western Venezuela, eastern Venezuela, western Guyana. We can therefore see that this, what they call the Miraflores mindset, has not really changed over the last 60 years or more. Venezuela, under Chavez, under Carlos Andres Perez, under Luis Rivera campaigns, under all of the presidents since Betancourt in the 1960s, right down to Maduro, have always had the same mindset. And they've embedded this notion that the British Empire has robbed them of this territory, this rich territory of the Essequibo. And for a time, they were able to convince other South American countries, other hemispheric countries, that this was their territory. They tried to use the problems of the Falklands faced by Britain and Argentina as an example of how the British Empire, this perfidious empire, robbed the Latinos of the territory that the Falklands actually belonged to Venezuela. Similarly, they've used that argument in Guatemala. This perfidious British Empire robbed Guatemala of the territory that later became Belize, or British Honduras or Belize. And they tried to say, this is the third example of this perfidious British Empire robbing a poor Latino country called Venezuela of 160,000 square kilometers. So this is the fiction that has been fed to the people of the Western Hemisphere. So for 6 decades or more, Guyana and the Guyana Defense Force have had to endure aggression and offensive actions by Venezuela as it attempts to reclaim or to claim this 2/3 of Guyana's territory represented by these 5 regions. My friends, the encounter at Argyle has not and cannot reverse that pattern. Guyana made a sensible decision to take this matter to the International Court of Justice, where it now rests. It is a strategic mistake to create another platform which does not have the authority to deliberate and make decisions on this matter. And Venezuela has injured Guyana once again. Argyle cannot reverse the pattern of Venezuelan diplomacy. On the contrary, it has rewarded Venezuelan determination to pursue a policy of perpetual aggression and subordination of Guyana. This must not be allowed to continue. Argyle has to be stopped. We have to go back to the ICJ. That is where the best interests of Guyana lie, the best interests of future generations of Guyana. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Let us cooperate for the younger. Let us cooperate for our land. Let us resolve to fight together. See we do it right together. Can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must